Well, a new Netflix docuseries is taking a look back at one of the world's most controversial gurus. Wild Wild Country tells the story of Bhagwan Rajneesh. He's the Indian spiritual guru who built what's being called a sex cult in the Oregon desert in the early 80s. His group fought with locals for control of the area, leading cult members to carry out a massive bioterror attack. For more on the Rajneeshees and their relevance today, I spoke with the series directors, brothers Chapan and Maclain and executive producer Mark Duplass.
Our vision was to create a community
based on compassion and sharing.
How does an Indian guru end up buying land in Oregon?
Yeah, so he had his ashram in Pune, India in the 60s and 70s, and he was kind of the first guru to marry kind of Western capitalism with Eastern mysticism. And Westerners were kind of flocking to his commune in India, so much so that they kind of outgrew their commune in India and decided to kind of head west to build this kind of like mega utopian city, that would be kind of their holy land. He was kind of the first guru to say, don't be ashamed of your wealth, be proud of what you've earned. That doesn't define who you are, but it's not something to be embarrassed of either.
I want that guru and his evil influence out of my city.
So what's fascinating is you've got this little town, Antelope, population 40. They're pretty ticked off that these folks have moved in.
Yeah, what's interesting about this story is you have the idealism of this cult. They purchased 60,000 acres of land, and they're going to build the ultimate city in their minds. And when I started finding out about that, I found myself really rooting for them. This is happening in the early 80s. The Jonestown massacre has just happened. The world is terrified of cults. The small town in Antelope nearby is thinking, we don't want these people in our town, but these are some of like the brightest young minds. They hire brilliant engineers from all over the world. They're doing groundbreaking technology with solar power, and unfortunately, as is wont to happen then and still now, when you start to fear the other and the unknown, a war starts to build between this conservative small town of Antelope and this sort of revolutionary new way of living of the Rajneeshees. And once you dig in, it just starts to escalate. And when these guys pitched me the story and they said, and things go bad, well, I said, well, how bad, And they said, well, it's the largest case of wiretapping and the largest case of food poisoning in American history.
The Rajneeshees set the stage for a big outbreak.
We are actually really interested in kind of finding out how this religion or cult was led to that moment. So we kind of want to peel back the political and cultural kind of layers of the time and kind of walk an audience through how it went from this peace-loving, meditative commune to a commune that armed themselves with assault rifles and took over the small town of Antelope, and then, yes, ended up poisoning over 750 people.
So is this ultimately about the separation of church and state?
Yeah, this is like, in a lot of ways, a story about how a church essentially builds a city. I mean, they were a legal entity out there. They were incorporated. They had a city charter that allowed them to issue their own building permits, have their own police force. But the question becomes like, well, is a church owning this city? Does a church control a police force? Is a church building this city? And so it ends up becoming a pretty fascinating constitutional issue.
You feel sympathy for, yes, this is a small conservative town in Oregon who might be a little bit judgmental of the Rajneeshees because they are other and they're different and they're a little set in their ways, but I can understand that if I'm in a small town. It's almost like watching someone come in and gentrify and change all your ways. But then at the same time, if I'm a Rajneeshi, I've moved to a place, I bought this land, America's the land of opportunity. I want to set it up to do my own thing. I'm not hurting anybody. Why do you have to come after me and try to get rid of me? It's very much an equal weighted storytelling where there really is no bad guy. You're just kind of following them as they get more and more entrenched and start to do things that you can't really imagine.
We were going to mount a full-scale assault.
We will be ready to protect ourselves.
There's a larger cultural component to this story that's as timely as ever, that is about the way people are digging in right now in this country, the way people are viewing the other as you are different than me and we will never be able to cross this divide. This happened in the early 80s as a microcosm with these two societies, and it did not end well.